So lower oil prices are helping South African factories right now. The costs of their inputs are coming down. The question we're asking tonight is, does this new situation where oil prices are incredibly low on the global arena give our own government more room to implement our economic blueprint, the National Development Plan? And what is the vision for factories? We're joined now in our Pretoria studio by Economic Planning Advisor at the National Planning Commission in the Presidency of South Africa. That's Ismael Lagardien. Ismael, thank you so much for joining us. So let's start with what the NDP says about factories. Small businesses create jobs. In lieu of that, while we're waiting for that, factories should be creating jobs, but they're not. My reading of the NDP is that we're strong with commodities on the low end, we're strong on the high end with services and banking and things like that. And there is a recognition that our factories, our manufacturing in the middle, isn't that productive if you look at the costs of labor and inputs, and there was a call for more innovation, things like that. Do you agree with that assessment?
That's a fair assessment. What we're doing in the planning branch is we have to keep in touch with what's happening in the global markets and in the global political economy, but we also have to remain focused. Our problem in South Africa has been in the last couple of years is people read parts of the National Development Plan, let's say the section on manufacturing, and build an entire response on that, whereas we ask for people to look at the complete package. You can't just look at manufacturing and productivity without looking at investment. You can't look at investment without looking at infrastructure. So the approach we want is for people to look at the National Development Plan in its entirety. That's the one point. The other point is also of course, the drop in petrol prices giving consumers and manufacturers a bit more room to maneuver and a bit of extra cash. And that will either be spent on consumer products or it could be saved. Of course, we encourage savings. But there's a spiral of negativity that we should try and avoid, whereas everything that happens in the global economy, we use that as an excuse as not to do our work at home. I read reports on the drop of petrol price from various sectors and various economists. One says it's bad news, one says it's good news. In the meantime, what's happening is work doesn't get done. In the meantime, what happened is accountability for implementation of the National Development Plan is put aside. So what we're encouraging people to do is focus on the National Development Plan, and we certainly have. The medium-term strategic framework was put in place last year and agreed. So government departments have adopted it and are continuing to adopt it. But we, as the population of South Africa, we should use this drop of oil in the price of oil and use that extra cash we had for investing in the economy, for investing as opposed to increasing debt. So there is certainly a lot to be gained from the drop in the oil price, but we must not allow these movements in the global economy to distract or to detract us from our main objective, and that is to create jobs, reduce poverty, and lower inequality. So we keep our focus. We try and keep our focus in the planning branch, notwithstanding global shifts. And I'm not saying we're naive or we're ignoring it. We have to remain in touch with what happens in the global economy, but we also have to just do our work as public servants and implement the National Development Plan.
And Ismael, like you say, it could in fact be positive. I guess one of the negative criticisms that you were talking about around the NDP is not only looking at the different sectors, but looking at the whole document and saying, sure, it's so big and it's so broad that when we say we're implementing the NDP right now, what does it mean? What are the practical steps that are being focused on right now?
Well, what we've done is we took the National Development Plan and we broke it into 5 years, sort of workable chunks. And it's a matter of priority and sequencing. So we looked at what are our priorities. And you break it up into 5-year workable chunks. And you have each government department read the National Development Plan, look at their own strategic plans and what they can achieve in the next 5 years. We're asking the government departments, what will you do in the next 5 years? And at the end of the 5-year term, when we do a review, when we speak to the Auditor General, when the Auditor General speaks to departments, can you produce evidence of what you have done? So we're going about it very methodically and very systematically. The NDP is being broken up into 5-year workable chunks. So it starts, the current phase starts at in 2014 and runs to 2019. So we have, each government department has bought into the National Development Plan and shaped their development plans for their governments, departments, for the provinces on the basis of the broad vision of the National Development Plan.
If we look at the main purpose that you alluded to, creating jobs, where are we right now? Because one of the main engines was small businesses. We look at the looting that's happened in townships, exposing a lot of the struggles, I think, of small businesses. Then we move to factories. So good news out today, but the factories are saying that when it comes to employment, that they're not going to be employing in the next few months. We also have, of course, the power constraints. Where are those jobs going to come from, Ismael?
Most of the jobs we've envisaged will come from the private sector. And as economic history has shown us, and history of the last, in political economy of in various parts of the world, whether it's the Taiwanese model, whether it's the Chinese model, even in the US, we find a lot of jobs are being created by small businesses. And that is where we need to focus. So we need to get a coherence in our policies, which we're working, which the planning branch can do so much. Now government departments have to implement. And that's the key to understanding the National Development Plan. As a planning branch, we do not, well, up till now, we're an advisory body. Government departments have to implement. So jobs will come from the private sector. Jobs will be created by the private sector, so investment has to be created in the private sector, and government relations with the private sector needs to be improved. And that is a very important. The private sector needs to feel confident that the government is working, and the government is on their side to create jobs and to lift most South Africans from from poverty. We should move away from this antagonism between the public and the private sector.
I think so many people agree with that. So what are the right noises that departments can make? And if we put our money where our mouth is, what should we see perhaps in the budget that says we want to encourage investment, we want to give certainty?
Well, I would just say one small contentious thing is I don't like the idea of making noises, because the noises are just, we create these dissonant discourses that keep us away from focusing on the real work that needs to be done. So let me just state that briefly. But what we need to do is make it easier for small businesses to invest. We need to make it, reduce the cost of doing business. Now that sounds like a pretty highfalutin thing, but it must be easier for entrepreneurs to create businesses, to create entrepreneurial ventures, and that is very important. We need to improve the tax regimes, we need to improve legislation, and so we need to just increase the cost, reduce the cost of doing business to increase investment.
All right, thank you so much. I hope we can chat to you again. That was Ismael Lagardien from the National Planning Commission in the Presidency of South Africa.